Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this book launch of Unsung Valor. And I'm particularly delighted to be here with all of you, and I'm looking forward to this entire event for a multiple of reasons. So, Unsung Valor, Forgotten Heroes from the Kurukshetra War is a collection of stories that has been curated by Sai Surupa Iyer, best-selling author, and published by Bloomsbury under the Indica label. And we have with us today Professor Vishwa Adluri, who has very, very graciously consented to be the chief guest and to launch this book. So I'll get into I'll get into the details of what we're going to be covering over the next hour and a half. So after these introductions, we'll have Professor Adluri, who will deliver a talk on some aspects of the Mahabharata, the critical edition, and so on. After which we will do a launch of the book, and we'll hear from each one of the authors as well as the curator, and this will be followed by a Q&A session. You can send in your questions at any point using the chat function. We are also going to be live streaming this on Facebook, so if you want to watch it from there, you can do so. And towards the end, we'll collect all the questions and we'll answer them based on who they're addressed to. You can send in your questions to the your questions can be in general about the Mahabharata, the Kurukshetra war. They can be addressed to Professor Adluri, to Sai Surupa, the curator, or any of our authors. So with that, I'll do a quick introduction of Professor Adluri, even though he needs no introduction, but he holds PhD degrees in philosophy and in Indology, and he teaches religion and philosophy at Hunter College in New York. He also has a website at www.presocratics.org, and he is also on Twitter under Vishwa Adluri, all one word. And he, along with Joydeep Bagchi, have written two books, The Nescience and Philology and Criticism. And in the Nescience, they showed that how from its origins in the 18th century, Neo-Protestantism onwards, the critical method was used in making theological claims against rival philosophical and religious traditions. And in many, many ways, it is also a devastating expose of the institutional biases of 19th and early 20th century German Indology against Hindu and Indian scriptures. Then followed in 2018, Philology and Criticism, which was published by Anthem Press. And it is, as I said, a companion volume to the Nesciences. And it is the first work that presents a comprehensive review of the critical edition with overviews of the textual trees drawn up and how the logic of these textual trees determined editorial choices, as well as an in-depth analysis of the strengths and drawbacks of the critical edition. Now, in bringing together this collection of 10 authors, a very crucial critical role has been played by Indic Today, which performed this, which provided a platform and provided this opportunity for authors to showcase their works, bring out the best of talent that is available across our country and even outside. And Indic Today has been run by Ms. Yogini Deshpande, and I would invite her to say a few words about Indic Today.
Thanks, Abhinav, for the introduction. Namaskar, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Indic Today is the web media platform of Indic Academy. Its main thrust is to publish articles in different formats: quick reads, long reads, book reviews, and research papers on Shastras, civilization, Indic civilization, medieval history, earlier ancient history, and looking into subtopics such as ancient astrology, ancient mathematics, development of science in the Indic civilization, as well as critical pieces on Shastras, looking at some of other matters also, such as what are the Shastric influences on our everyday aspects, such as marriage, abortion, and other issues. At the same time, we are also encouraging young researchers. When I mean to say young, it may not necessarily be in terms of age, but in terms of ones who are on this path to start studying and writing in these different topics. And we provide tools. One is in terms of how to write. We provide access to workshops in writing, also mentoring in how to write. Even if pieces, there are aspects of editing that are involved. Some platforms may reject a piece if there is extensive editing involved, which is what we've typically tried not to do. So we try and accept as many pieces if the content is correct, and encourage young writers, researchers to write more on these different topics. We are always looking out for new writers who could be students or philosophy students who are pursuing their PhD. In the past 6 months, we've also started different languages, different Bharatiya languages, which is Hindi, Kannada. We've recently started in Telugu also, and Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, we are opting to go for English and Sanskrit format so that people who are studying Sanskrit, who are learning Sanskrit, will be able to improve their language skills based on having these two languages side by side in their for them to learn. So for those who are watching us, I would encourage you to submit your articles to editor@indictoday.com. Follow us on Twitter @indictoday.com and on Facebook. If you have any queries, please do reach out to me either personally for yogini@indicacademy.org or through editor@indictoday.com. Thank you. Abhinav, you can move forward.
Thank you, Yogini. And I'll now request Sai Surupa to share with us some more details about the book, because I provided a very, very brief introduction, but we are all very, very excited to hear about the book itself, how it came into creation, and a little bit about the authors themselves.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Abhinav. It was a pleasure hearing this story of Indic today, Yogini. Namaskar, everyone. Very happy to have you all and share this event of the launch of Unsung Valor with you all, and a heartful gratitude to Vishwagaru, who has agreed to be the chief guest. And thanks to Indic Academy and Indic Book Club, which made everything happen. And last but not the least, a round of appreciation for all my writers who got together and produced such a masterpiece of an anthology. I hope I have time to recollect the whole story that went behind the making of Unsung Valor.
Yes, of course.
So, about 3 years ago, Hari Kiran Garu, founder of Indic Academy, we were interacting about various aspects of literature and all. And he sent a very interesting graphic with respect to Game of Thrones, about some number of conspiracies, who made the maximum number of conspiracies or something like that. And immediately my first thought was about how about we make a similar graphical representation of the number of confrontations in the Kurukshetra battle of Mahabharata. It was an 18-day war, an epic level confrontation that claimed 18 Akshauhinis of army. That's nearly 4 million soldiers, warriors. That is not counting your Sarathis, Mahoots, and all the auxiliary men involved in the activities. Just the warriors, the say Rathi, Maharathi, Atirathi, the ones riding elephants, horsemen, infantry, everybody included. The war claimed over 4 million lives. So that's basically the armies of all the Mahajanapadas that were existing during the times of Mahabharata. So we all know that 11 Akshauhinis belonged to the Kaurava camp and 7 of them belonged to the Pandava camp. Now, very interesting statistics. I had published a series of articles on the statistics alone on Indic Today. You guys can search and read because the numbers are very interesting. But more interesting than the numbers is something which Hariji had pointed out, that 25% of the victories that each side scored came from warriors who are almost forgotten or who are more famous in folklore, but their actual contribution in the Battle of Kurukshetra is forgotten and remains unsung. For example, the very first story of Unsung Valor is on Airavan. So Airavan became more popular as a folk deity in the southern region of India, but his very valiant effort to overcome his opponents, be it Anuvinda, Vinda of Avanti, the Gandharan princes, his tales of valor go unsung. Same with Ghatotkacha, because a lot of people think that he just appeared on day 14 so that Krishna could save Arjuna from Karna's Shakti. But he had been fighting for all the 14 days and nobody talks about it. Same goes to Panchala prince called Yudhamanyu and his twin brother Uttamaujas. So both of them protected Arjuna's chariot wheels on a very critical day, the day 14 of the war. So this way there were a number of stories that go unsung, which is why we conducted a short story competition under the banner of Indica, inviting stories from the public, from people who are interested and passionate about Mahabharata, as passionate as I am passionate about Mahabharata, and probably the quotation that dharmo rakshati rakshitaha, maybe dharma aids people who want to walk on the path of dharma. We found immensely talented and undiscovered writers, all the 10 writers. If I can take all their names, it's Bharati, who wrote the story of Airavan, and yeah, I just Ranjit Radhakrishnan, who wrote the story of Shakuni, The Invincible about Jayadratha. There are 2 writers who wrote about the unsung battles of Jayadratha, Rupal Vaish and Abhyuday Kiran Hadal, Indra among Rakshasas, and the redeeming of Ghatotkacha. 2 stories on Ghatotkacha written by Siddharth Balaji and Shiv Kumar GV. Mediocre Son on Prativindhya, who is other. We talk about Abhimanyu, we talk about even Ghatotkacha, but we never talk about the sons of Draupadi and Amrita Talukdar. She chose to write about Prativindhya, the son of Yudhisthira and Draupadi, and his battles in the war. And Pranshu Saxena, who wrote about Yudhamanyu and Uttamaujas. Righteous traitor, that's about Yuyutsu, who did a Vibhishana in the Mahabharata. On the brink of battle, he changes sides. When Yudhishthira invites people from the other side to join his side, Yuyutsu changes side. And that has been wonderfully written by Rakshika Rajesh. And very young Abhyuday Kiran Hadal, I have to mention, he is a 14-year-old who wonderfully explored the psyche of Jayadratha. And yes, there is Deepak Rao, who also wrote the story of Bhagadatta. We often don't talk much about the participation of kings from the Northeast, which was very much a part of India. And Bhagadatta was the king of Assam and the rest of the Northeast, who participates in this war with no selfish interest of his own. So this way, we have collated and curated these unforgettable stories, which were rather unsung, and we hope the stories become popular. We hope Unsung Valor induces the same passion and interest in all the generations that would be reading this book in the epic of Mahabharata. And thanks a lot for this opportunity. So Abhinav, yes.
Thank you, Sai, for this introduction. I had, no idea so much of, fascinating nuggets exist both in the book itself as well as, the making of the book. I think that, there's a story there in itself. Without any further ado, I will request Professor Adluri to please, share his thoughts with us.
Hello, hello everyone. Hello, young and upcoming authors of the book Unsung Valor. Hello, Hari Kiranji. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very proud to be here today. And hello to all my good friends, Abhinav, Yogini, and the rest of the team. I was truly amazed by reading this book. And as you know, I am a scholar on the Sanskrit Mahabharata. So it has been, when I received the book, I felt a real pleasure. Why is that? It is because Indian tradition, the Mahabharata tradition, is essentially a storytelling tradition. And we've come to a point in life where today we think, oh, it's just a story. But if you look at politics today, if you look at where we are going with virtual reality and so on, storytelling seems to be a very powerful social force. And the Mahabharata taps into it and creates or injects social space or virtual space or a narrative space, space of identities, etc., with dharmic content. And that is why the Mahabharata is a dharmic text. It's not just a dharma text because it talks about dharma. The very fact that it is a storytelling exercise, the most tremendous storytelling exercise, kind of tells you, gives you that dharma. Let me give you an example to clarify. Suppose we are all hunters and we are very violent and we hunt all day, and at night we are tired, we wish to rest, but we do not know if while I'm sleeping, the Neanderthal laying next to me will kill me. So we cannot live like that. How do we become civilized? Let us now imagine that one of these primitive men stands up, or woman stands up and says, I'm going to tell you all a story. So everybody suddenly moves a little closer, gathers together, forgets their animosities and so on, and they sit together and form an ethical substance vis-a-vis the story. This Mahabharata tradition was so important that it was kept alive for over 2,000 years. I don't want to get involved in the dates, forget it. Mahabharata would be a great book if it was written tomorrow. So the date does absolutely nothing to it, except that we understand a few things better with that. So I am going to share with you a few slides on the Mahabharata text manuscript tradition, how this story was preserved, and how this story came down to us. This is one of the manuscripts that you see here, but what do you mean by Suktankar, who created the critical edition, collected various number of manuscripts, and he put, this is a birch bark manuscript. As you can see, this is the bark of a birch tree, and written on these are the precious stories so precious to us today that we would rather die than lose the Mahabharata. And scholars have dedicated their lives, poets have dedicated their lives, philosophers have dedicated their lives to preserving this text. So besides the palm leaf or birch bark they used to use as writing instruments, a pen or a brush, and sometimes there was a sharp metal stylus, like a blade, and you would make incisions in the material, and then you take lamp black, which is also called soot, and rub it into the depressions and blow the rest away, and you will see black writing in it. Now, a palm leaf lasts maximum 400 years. Birch bark lasts 800 years. But as you can see, the medium is very perishable. It's not like today with paper. Sometimes wooden planks are used, not too often. And I want you to pay attention to this person. He's called a scribe. For sure, this is Tamil and not Sanskrit. But notice how he holds the book, and letter by letter, nearly 75,000 verses of the Mahabharata, approaching 100,000 if you add the Harivamsha, has been preserved like this, which would mean that a father would have just enough time to train his son to be a scribe. And the son would spend his whole life inscribing and teach his son to do this. So think of generations of these scribes that have preserved this magnificent story for us today. So it's not just a story. It is the blood. It is the sweat. It is the ink. It is the soul of who we are. Then Suktankar saw that many manuscripts were being destroyed in the sense that they were falling apart. As you know, in modern India, there are no more kings. Usually, kings used to patronize the scribes and make sure that we had a sufficient, ample number of manuscripts available. But since we no longer paid attention to these things because of we had other political problems to solve, such as independence and so on, many of these manuscripts were becoming lost irreparably, irretrievably. So Suktankar collects the best minds of his time. He goes to the Raja Pratinidhi of Aundh, and with his support is able to fund minimally this project of collecting as many manuscripts as possible. So one of the first things he does is, that's enough for that. So one of the first things he does is preserve the manuscripts. How? He makes a lot of cards, slips, and notes. For every line, he notes all the variations in the various manuscripts. That entire data of every line in the Mahabharata with every available variation is now recorded in the critical edition. So the critical edition is a text of texts. It is a composition of compositions. No wonder, because we are storytellers here and not cynical materialist scholars, let me tell you that Suktankar is the Abhinava Vyasa of our time. Because remember, Vyasa did the same thing to the Veda. He too compiled and classified the Veda. So, and Suktankar has done that for the Mahabharata. So just as an intellectual project and as the heritage of the Mahabharata, the critical edition is extremely important. A different kind of attack on Mahabharata came from the West. They insisted that stories have no meaning and represent the mindset of a primitive people. And Hindus, Indians, Hindus, have been careless about their history, and that the Westerners would teach Hindus how to give up these stories and become more scientific. So they took these texts and they said, some parts of this text, Mahabharata, looks, decent. Which parts? The war books. The war books are decent, maybe historical, but the rest is just garbage stories. And the whole Devasura Yuddha aspect, this whole nonsense with Krishna. Can there be a Bhagavad Gita in the Mahabharata? They argued, because at the moment of battle, who would stop and listen to 700 shlokas coming from Krishna? So these must have been added later on, defiling, transforming the Kshatriya original epic into what we have today, a Brahmanic Krishna-based text. So Suktankar looks at the Mahabharata and he thinks that he sees that the Mahabharata has some design and some plan, and you can read it as a whole, it is meaningful. But on the other hand, he has to defend the Mahabharata against the charges that the Mahabharata is a chaotic book into which anybody could have interpolated anything at all. So theories were floating around about how certain portions, especially the Krishna Bhakti portions, were written into the Mahabharata, having taken them from the Puranas. So in the face of this so-called perverse science, a science that is iconoclastic, smashing the symbols of value of another culture, also known as a vandalism, also known as rape and pillage, which is what this science was, Suktankar stood up and he said, let me show them what the Mahabharata is. And by noting the different significant variations, as if they were markers of the gene code of Mahabharata, he was able to genealogically reconstruct that ancestor from which all other manuscripts were derived. And guess what? Once he created the archetype of this manuscript, it contained everything. It contained Krishna. It contained Dharma. It contained the battle scenes, but the battle scenes contained even more Dharma interspersed in it. So we can no longer call the Mahabharata a chaotic text, a bulged, swollen up, meaningless text into which things were added. Okay, so now you have the ability to read the Mahabharata as a whole without any doubts. Pious people might read their family Mahabharata book. Telugu people might be reading Andhra Mahabharatamu. Some may be reading Nilakantha edition, which is called the Vulgate. And that is all right. But those editions will not tell you which ones were slightly later editions than the other ones. So if you want to have a baseline text, the critical edition is the best. Now, how much did the critical edition bring up as the archetype? You'll be surprised, quite a lot. About 75,000 verses of the Mahabharata are now part of this archetype. Let us imagine that we now lose all these manuscripts. They're probably already lost, because I tried to go to Bori and ask them, but Bori is run like a private club, and they're sitting on all the manuscripts. No one digitizes them. Let's just say they lose the whole thing. What Suktankar has done is preserved every single variation. So if you digitize the whole thing, you take the critical edition archetype and say, modify with additions from T for Telugu. The computer can go and create the entire Telugu Mahabharata and print it out for you. Every single Mahabharata is preserved. It is preserved how? With an archetype with variations given below the line. What a magnificent intellectual enterprise this is. I would like to now move on to Suktankar's own words and share something he has written, which is very dear to me. So please, I hope no one is saying anything in the chats, because I'm so focused on this, I'm not looking at the chats. All right. Suktankar writes, the epic poets we find are using every means in their power to expound, illustrate, and popularize what we may call what we might for short call the philosophy of the self, Atma Vidya, a lofty philosophy of ethical autonomy, karma, unparalleled for its boldness and comprehensiveness, and to convey their message of moral duty and hope. Hope. Where is hope coming in? As moksha, as Saguna Brahman, Krishna Vasudeva, with emphasis on the application of these principles of dharma and moksha to the problem of daily life. When we realize these facts, questions as to the historicity of the polyandrous marriage of Draupadi, or the precise ethnic affinities of the Pandavas, meaning are they Aryans, are they Dravidians, are they hill people, was there an Aryan migration, etc. So these questions, or even the exact date of Mahabharata war, or questions of the origin and development of the epic, these and other favorite topics of academic wrangling lose some of their glamour and cease to engross us. What remains? Only the akhyana, only the storytelling, only the undivided heartbeat of the Hindus, which goes on pumping Mahabharata blood generation after generation. I saw in the biographies of most of you, you heard these stories from your grandmother or your grandparents. The institution of grandmothers being your Mahabharata professors all through generations of Indian history is a far more concrete, far more personal university that has ever existed in the world. Nowhere else in the world are the subject matters of narratology, literature, poetry, poetic imagery, ethics, values, all the subjects of the humanities have been transmitted knowingly or unknowingly from grandmother to the next generation. It's not just a book, it's an institution. It is a civilization creating, civilization maintaining, civilization perfecting institution. Mahabharata may have a long history, but we are more interested in its future. So this mighty work, which is primarily concerned with finding the solution to the problem of evil, meaning dharma and adharma in life, nay, to the problem of existence itself, that is, this is pravritti dharma, or dharma that you use in everyday life, and this is nivritti dharma, or the dharma of renunciation. Now, something that you authors have brought up and what you have done reminded me of the next quotation from Suktankar. On account of the rapidly shifting planes of perspective of the vast canvas on which the epic poets operate in developing a three-dimensional theme. What is the three-dimensional theme the Mahabharata poet is doing? Adhibautika, just a story, just a historical story. Adhidaivika or Adhidaivika, if you want to make it a derivative, that level is the dharma level, the story on an ethical plane. And Adhyatmika, the story on a philosophical plane of understanding Brahman. So because the Mahabharata is painting on a canvas in these three dimensions, the construction of the story has become complex naturally, and its form has given rise in modern times to many amusing misconceptions and to some grotesque theories. And here is the kind of deep rishi that Suktankar is. And I would urge you to listen to this line and take it to heart. But I can assure that there is no serious contradiction or inconsistency in the Mahabharata, as you may have been led to believe from a cursory perusal of it. Wait, where did I jump? Okay. I hope I have succeeded in showing you that the Mahabharata, which may have started as an epic, has certainly not ended up in becoming a chaos as Oldenburg imagined. And Oldenburg is just one of the many. It would be a pardonable hyperbole to say that it has ended in becoming the Hindu cosmos. So I just wanted to, I have some comments on the different books that, stories that you have written, but let me see how we are going to. So Abhinav or Yogini, do you want me to talk about the book, or is someone else going to talk about the book? That was my spiel about how important the narrative storytelling project is.
So, Professor Adluri, I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that I have goosebumps listening. You describe the stupendous work of Sukthankar in collecting these hundreds of manuscripts together, and we are talking about a time when none of these electronic apparatus existed to make easy some of this work. And I think for people who want to get a glimpse into the mind that Sukthankar was, I would recommend they read his book on the meaning of the Mahabharata.
Absolutely. It's an excellent, outstanding book on the meaning of the Mahabharata. It's available from Motilal Banarsi Das, but I have a PDF of it. So anybody who's interested, just email me and I will be happy to send it to you.
And people should also know that this book is now out of copyright. So, electronic versions are available, as Professor Adluri said. I think if you go to archive.org, you can also get a copy. Or if you prefer the physical paper version, you can buy it from Motilal Banarsi Das. And I would definitely recommend people read the first chapter itself, which is an expose of sorts of the kind of approaches that these scholars brought. And we would love to hear you talk more about this, but I will I'll let Sai make a call on how she wants to take this.
Thank you, Abhinav and Vishwagaru. I agree with Abhinav, and I am sure everybody agrees with me that we literally felt goosebumps listening to the journey of Sukthankarji in compiling this critical edition. I would also like to add that the whole quantitative study that I made of Kurukshetra was based on the critical edition translated by Dr. Debroy. I just kept referring to his translation and kept on recording each of the confrontations in an Excel sheet, and we could record about 466 confrontations that happened during the Battle of Kurukshetra throughout those 18 days. So that is the level of detail captured in the critical edition, and the nature of this Kurukshetra war is like the detail keeps on unfolding as the war progresses.
Yes.
And then by the time we reach the day 12, 13, 14, the desperation is so evident in each warrior. It cannot get more real than that. I mean,
it is not just real. It is, in a way, it is hyper real. There is a kind of a magical realism to it. It's like almost an experience machine you step into, and the things keep changing. Just you look in one side, you see action, but on the other side you see Krishna smiling, and then you look back again at the action, and the action has transformed itself into something new. In a way, the world in the Mahabharata is much more alive than the life outside Mahabharata. It is the light inside the Mahabharata is somehow brighter, and that which is true, that which is good, that which is beautiful shines so much better inside the text than outside it.
Yes, cannot agree more with you. Mahabharata is more real than reality itself.
Yeah, of course. Of course it is. For the sake of this book, so many people lived and they found meaning in their external lives because of this book. I'm included in that.
Sure.
So, Saiji, do you want me to make a few comments about the book itself?
Yes, we would love it, because all the writers are waiting with bated breath to hear what you think about our stories. It has been, I know we cannot even dream of claiming we have V.S. Sukthankarji's passion or even your passion, but this whole team was united, because all of us are passionate about Mahabharata. All of us, each of us have a area of interest which connects us very deeply to the Mahabharata. So we would love to hear what you think about the book, Vishwagaru.
Yeah, great. It is a great book, and I absolutely loved it. I read it twice. Once was a fast read because it was so enjoyable. I didn't want to make any notes or notice anything. I just wanted to kept going. The first story, The Fall of the First Sun by Bharati Venkat, describes the battle of Iravan, who battled the Avanti princes Vinda and Anuvinda, as Saiji already told you, Shakuni and the Gandhara princes, and finally Alambusha on the 8th day. He is killed by the Rakshasa, Iravan, but avenged by Ghatotkacha. Now, this story, again, as Sai said, is forgotten in the larger Mahabharata community, but the Tamil Draupadi tradition really loves Iravan. And even though it is in Tamil Nadu, the head of Iravan, or also known as Kutantavar, is mounted on a chariot. The head is also turned towards Kurukshetra, and an entire recitation of the Mahabharata takes place during this festival. Many many stories have been added to his story. For example, the fact that he did not want to sacrifice himself without being married, and nobody wanted to marry a hero who was about to be sacrificed. So Krishna, in the form of Mohini, married Iravan. So to get to marry Krishna is, of course, the highest possible honor in this universe. So Iravan is great for that. And this story gave me a kind of I only knew the great Iravan of the Draupadi Amma festivals. So this humanized that hero in a very beautiful way. Ranjit Radhakrishnan's Shakuni, the dice of death, was deeply psychological. I just love the way that most of the action is in Shakuni's mind as a series of reflections on Vidura, Krishna, and Draupadi, who in turn reflect Shakuni's own hubris, confusion, and doom. I must say that the way Ranjit ji talks about how Shakuni tries to game Krishna, and the way Krishna escapes Vidura, not only Shakuni's gaming, but also gets Shakuni caught in his own game, is just, it was a pleasure for me. And Ranjit reminded me of Krishna's cleverness throughout the Mahabharata. I don't know about two, but I think three stories hover around the Saindhava king. The Invincible by Rupal Vaish is the story of Jayadratha, whose story is usually told from the perspective of Abhimanyu, who is killed in the Chakravyuha, or from the perspective of Arjuna, who vows to kill Jayadratha and keep his word. The character of Jayadratha is complex. He's full of wit and reason, almost likable, but also very chilling. Abhyuday Kiran Hadal beautifully brings the narrative to a close in his contribution, The Killing of Jayadratha, again, without going directly to the actual act of killing. He only comes to it towards the end of the story. Although the story is a well-known narrative of the affairs of men, it's all a macho business, right? Battle, oaths, vengeance. Hadal focuses on Jayadratha's wife and Duryodhana's sister, Dushala. Her inevitable widowhood forms a tender counterpart to the thoroughly detestable Jayadratha. But even the popular events following Arjuna's vow to kill Jayadratha is interlaced by other characters who intervene in unexpected and delightful ways. In the day of the great oath, Mission Jayadratha, Pranshu Saxena narrates the events of the 14th day from Yudhamanyu's perspective. Along with recounting glorious deeds, Yudhamanyu reveals flashes of humor, and he even has Bhima laughing heartily in a joke that was completely believable and keeping in cogent with what I imagine Bhima to be. All right. Indra Among Rakshasas by Siddharth Balaji narrates the valor of Ghatotkacha, the son of Bhima and Hidimba. His moment in the his moment of glory comes on the 14th day. I think the entire book revolves around the 14th day in one way or another. But what I liked about Siddharthji's tale is the way he uses like a mantra. Did I fail you? Did I fail our cause? I am so proud to be your son. Is extreme first by the author. The author has it as an epilogue, and then he also has it has these words repeated by Anjana Parva and finally Ghatotkacha. I mean, it is very sad. We forget that wars are about fathers and sons, mainly the men who are fighting on the battlefield. And it was just too much to bear if it were not for the art of poetry and narrative and storytelling. This would break our hearts. And we feel that this Rakshasa, Ghatotkacha, is more human and more vulnerable than human beings himself. And the bringing in of Hidimba was just wonderful because remember, Hidimba too was more human than human, and certainly not a Rakshasi. Although that's who she was by birth, she falls in love with Bhimasena. She goes to Kunti and Yudhisthira, makes sure she gets Bhimasena, carries Bhimasena on her hip, enjoys him, gives him a son, and that son will play a decisive role in saving the lives of Arjuna and consequently the other Pandavas. It's a good story. The story of Bhagadatta, I mean, by now you all kind of know this is from Lord. This story is, I think, off a piece from the Lord of the Rings or Lord of the Ring, and also there was some other movie I saw this sort of Asuric demonic king mounted on a gigantic elephant, which looks more primitive and science fiction-y than any ordinary elephant. So the story about Bhagadatta, the warrior king by Deepak, was very, very nice. It's a very important story because it contains the impaling of Krishna Vasudeva by the Vaishnava Astra that he had, that Naraka had obtained and given to his son Bhagadatta. The story is really beautiful. The Mahabharata itself focuses on the turban and the eyes that fall down and so on. But this narrative almost fills in the blanks and makes the Bhagadatta story come alive. I had forgotten that Arjuna does get down from his chariot and circumambulates the fallen Bhagadatta. I had to go back and look and say, really? And yes, it's true. That was a wonderful nuance added to the story by Vyasa, and Deepak Ji picks it up and presents it very beautifully. G.V. Shiv Kumar, I think I gave away what I was going to say about his work, Redeeming of Ghatotkacha, because he does bring up Hidimba, his mother, to sort of, make the whole scene very tender. And I wonder what Hidimba felt when Ghatotkacha falls. And I wonder what Bhimasena felt when Ghatotkacha falls. Unfortunately, in the Mahabharata, the focus shifts to Yudhisthira, as far as I remember, and Yudhisthira is the one doing the loudest lamentations, but I think we don't have to be cynical about it, but poor Bhimasena. So that story makes you cry. Yuyutsu is an interesting character. And I think Rashika Rajesh tells the story with nuance and innovation under the title, The Righteous Traitor. Yuyutsu is important because his name means he who is eager to fight. So Bhagavad Gita begins with the line, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. So the Yuyutsavahas are the fighters arrayed, eager for battle. Now, Yuyutsu carries with him the stigma of being born to a Vaishya maid. So, and yet he chooses dharma and crosses over, just after the Bhagavad Gita is delivered, Yuyutsu crosses over from the Kaurava side to the Pandava side. And this is perfectly reciprocal, like chiasmatically reciprocal to Pandu's son Karna, who had already crossed over to the Kaurava side. And this crossover is symmetrical because Yuyutsu is choosing dharma and Karna is choosing adharma. So the Mahabharata has all these inner harmonies, connections, parallels, echoes, vibrations, and so on, which hold up the universe of characters very beautifully and makes the story so deep and unforgettable. Again, look at the parallel between Yuyutsu being born of a Vaishya maid and Vidura's birth to a maid in the previous generation when Ambika sends her servant girl to sleep with Vyasa in Niyoga, and the Vidura, who is an incarnation of Dharma, is born. Yuyutsu is the dharmic remainder of Dhritarashtra's adharmic rule. Whereas Arjuna, overcome by Dharma Samshaya, says, Na yotsa. Yuyutsu is, on the other hand, eager to fight the battle on the side of Dharma. Again, Rashika Rajesh tells the story with nuance, elaborating the relationship between Yuyutsu and his mother, and the blind king, showing that the king was not the nicest person to his mother, and yet somehow inherited from his mother, no doubt, he grows up to be a dharmic character. This is the righteous story. Now, this is where I was humbled. This was Amruta Talukdar's Prativindhya story. I am sorry to say that Prativindhya was not on my radar at all, having read the Mahabharata all this time, until your story, Amrutaji, and you really, really tell a good tale there. So on that note of humility, I'm humbled by the creativity of all of you. May God bless you, and may the Mahabharata protect you through your life. I'm done.
Thank you so much for those detailed, kind reviews of each story, Vishwagaru. I think these
Thank you.
moments, the past moments, are just so memorable to all of us. We are going to cherish your words, and that is going to keep the lamp of Mahabharata blazing in each of us. I cannot thank you enough, and I'm extremely glad that the way you spoke about the book, it shows that you lived Mahabharata again. That's what
Through
you
the
had.
book, exactly. Exactly. The book was really, really wonderful. It was a good read. I like the fact that it was well edited. There were no unnecessarily flashy, complicated sentences which demonstrate cleverness. There was a wisdom, and what I don't have in my scholarly life is the ability to simply enjoy the Mahabharata. I always have to be fighting the wrong views on Mahabharata. So this was like a luxury trip for me, this book. I think that it's amazing how much coherence there is of cultural consciousness in each of the story. It's almost as if only one person wrote all these stories, and only one person was reading it as it was written, because there was nothing to disagree, there was nothing to criticize. It was just it was a pleasure, and I thank each one of these writers. I hope they keep writing and writing and writing as we go forward.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Vishwagaru. I also want to add that once these writers were selected from the competition, it did not really, end there for them. They attended this workshop that Indica sponsored them for, and again reworked their stories. Trying to improve the craft and narrative there. And
Yeah, and
then
that's the important thing. I don't think anybody will write a story in the first sitting, and the patience, that's the yoga here. The yoga of writing is a very good yoga, and just writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting. It shows. I mean, they're highly polished. And also, Hari Kiranji, it's a great idea of yours. Ours is also a merit culture. We value merit in our society. So the idea of competitions, the idea of selections, the idea of putting the weight behind those who can carry this culture forward, who can bear the weight of this culture forward, the whole concept was very appealing to me in this way. That there was a competition, that these are not, you didn't put something out there and say randomly, send in your stuff and we will publish it on our platform. So that adds some value to me, in my view, on this.
I just want to add here that after this phenomenal success, we are doing 3 more anthologies. The next anthology would be based on Meenakshi Jain's book, The Flight of Deities. That's being curated by Avtams Kumar. And then we have the lesser known characters of Mahabharata, which is now being curated, not the Kurukshetra war, but overall Mahabharata lesser known characters. This is being curated by Aditi Banerjee, and she's again selected 15 authors. And we have one more being curated by Shiv Kumar, which is on Indic women of substance. So this is 3 more anthologies are in the pipeline. But thank you, Vishwa. Thank you so much for the comments.
I would like to add that there's one more coming up in Hindi. Soon we'll be having the announcement for this week for a competition for it. So that anthology would be on Hindi, in Hindi language. So please look out for the announcement and apply for the competition. Thank you, Vishwa.
Thank you, Yogini-ji.
So thanks again for that, for those kind reviews, Vishwa Garu. Now, the writers would like to interact with you, ask you questions and learn from you. So with your permission, can I open the floor for some questions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Along with them, I'm also sitting at Vyasa's feet. So we are all classmates here. Sure.
Yes, I particularly liked that comment in one of your webinars where you lost trust in all those Indologist professors, and you said you decided to throw them out and bring in Vedavyasa, and there cannot be a better guru than Vedavyasa himself.
No, there cannot be. There cannot be a better guru than Vedavyasa. Think about it. He gave us the Bhagavad Gita, and not just the Mahabharata, but the Bhagavad Gita is for all of us, practically speaking, the scripture. And if you look at it, you will say, oh yeah, but there is also the Upanishads. But then Upanishads are Veda, and he's the one who compiled the Veda. So Hinduism is Vyasism. And if we don't want to call ourselves Hindus, we can call ourselves Vyasids. We are Vyasids.
We should be privileged too. That's a privilege to be, at the feet of Vedavyasa. And if I can quote our Vamadeva Shastri ji here, who also goes by David Frawley.
I know him.
He says, because the West thinks about a lot of these isms as some, maybe Marxism or whatever isms that have come up in the late 20th century. The West thinks they are some inventions, but each of these isms can sit in some small corner of Vedavyasa's mind. His mind is that inclusive. That was the opinion on Vedavyasa's, basically universal philosophy. So thank you so much. And the first question would be asked by Bharati. Bharati, she wrote the story on Airavan. So Bharati, unmute yourself and please go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Adluri, for your kind words. That was a privilege. So my question is, if we separate the religion factor from the Mahabharata, what in your view would be the single most important reason for its timelessness and relevance through the ages?
First of all, there is no word for religion in Sanskrit. At most, you can call it matam. And so if you take out the Vaishnava matam, there is still the Saguna Brahman and the axis of dharma in its nivritti dharma and pravritti dharma forms. Just as there is Ishvara in the universe, there is Vyasa in the text. He's everywhere. He appears selectively to some people at critical moments and disappears. So that separation itself is problematic, but I think what is enduring about the Mahabharata is the fact that it most resembles our lived life outside. No other text is able to absorb not just the material characters and relationships, but also imaginations, hopes, possibilities, fantasies that make our life out here livable. Even those are transmuted into the text. So the text will remain as long as there are human beings, because it is a mirror to who we are. It was a mirror also to those who removed Krishna Vasudeva from the text, i.e. the Germans, and what they saw in the text was just a horrific war. And coincidentally, look what happened in Germany and in Europe at the summit of that episteme. So to give you a precise answer, as long as there is life, there is the text. The Mahabharata tale is there, because life itself is a story. And the Mahabharata is the story of all stories.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Rupal?
Yes. Next question is from Rupal, who wrote the story of Jayadratha, the Invincible.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you, sir. I mean, I am just speechless. Listening about Mahabharata from you has been a privilege.
Okay.
Rupal, the volume, we are not able to hear you. If you can.
Okay. Is that better?
It's very faint.
Maybe if you spoke closer to the microphone.
First of all, sir, thank you so much.
Okay. I can hear.
Yeah. And my question is about the textual historical method that you have talked about in your NA Sciences. And has it changed the scenario, do you think, now? And what its impact has been on India? And if it has changed, then how is it changing how academics view Mahabharata in India? That is what I'm basically concerned about, because mostly we hear about it like it being dismissed as just a story, as the Germans actually made it out to be. So
Right.
has it changed that perception?
It has changed on an academic level for the worse after independence and just before independence, because we were a colony of Europe, of United Kingdom. And there is a feature whereby the most intellectual people of a dominated culture begin imitating that culture, the culture of the oppressor. Some of this has happened in India, and our intellectuals have bought the portion that history is a true story, whereas myth is a false story. But fortunately, this has remained only in that privileged academic class of like JNU people. It has not percolated to the grandmothers and the true recipients of Vyasa. And it can never go away. It can never go away. But even at the academic level, with Suktankar creating the critical edition, it more or less ends the many crazy things people say about the Mahabharata. For example, there was an interview in which Romila Thapar said that, Mahabharata was composed over 1,000 years. Now, Suktankar has clearly shown that that's not the case. So, in a way, Suktankar himself says that these people are becoming historical, that these academics who raised questions against the Mahabharata, trying to dismantle it, deconstruct it, they have become history, and the text itself is living, burgeoning, pulsating, and marching on. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next is Siddharth Balaji, who wrote that story on Ghatotkacha, which you liked a lot.
Namaste, Dr. Dhuri.
Namaste ji.
It's an amazing privilege and honor to interact with you.
Come.
And thank you for your kind words on all of our stories. My question is a kind of a follow-up to what Rupalji had asked. Like you had mentioned in your opening remarks, the tradition of grandparents and parents reciting the Mahabharata to their children and to teaching them about it, that's in today's India, that's the only thing that's keeping the text alive, because in today's age, most of it is a colonial outlook on the Mahabharata. And I think, funnily, even one question here has popped up on the Zoom, the interview, the discussion right now, whether it's a reality or it's a fiction, is Mahabharata. So that the question always that everyone seems to focus on is the historicity aspect. Is there anything we as sort of laymen in this Mahabharata knowledge, in this sphere, is there anything we could do to sort of change the perspective on this slowly, that instead of focusing only on the historicity, can we show people that there's more to it? Is there any way we could change it?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, please don't be so pessimistic. I mean, there was the Doordarshan Mahabharata, which was very good, and it did not take up historicizing perspectives. And we should try to be good at what we are good at, not try to be good at something else, right? So the paradharmo bhayavaha. So the paradharma here is that historical explanation, and your dharma is to do exactly what you're saying. These stories, these are amazingly, Amar Chitra Katha has actual quotations from the Mahabharata itself, from the Sanskrit Mahabharata. So this has been going on, and it will go on because you young writers, upcoming and have just come up, should I say, not upcoming, but have just come up already, are contributing to that. There is a reason why you wrote the story and didn't do something historic. So Vivekananda once went to Kashmir to a temple called Kshir Bhavani Mandir. It was completely destroyed by vandals. And Vivekananda got really upset, angry, tears in his eyes. And he shouted, "Oh, mother, if I were here, I would have fought on your behalf. I would have protected you." And the icon of Kshir Bhavani spoke and said, "Who protects who?" Vyasa has been protecting us. Mahabharata has been protecting us, not the other way. And when the time comes, as it did with Suktankar, Mahabharata renews herself. This is the freshest story, and cutting edge of material here. So I would not be as pessimistic, but what you should do is keep writing, keep talking, keep thinking, keep writing, keep talking, connecting events in our everyday life to the Mahabharata, showing how the Mahabharata is something which explains what human beings are and why they do what they do. Great.
Thank you, Vishwagaru. That point was something which I always believed, that Mahabharata would find herself another very competent writer when she wills it. When
Even if humanity were wiped out, I'm sure the Mahabharata will not be wiped out.
That's something to cling on to. That's a great hope to cling on to. The next question would be from Shiv Kumar GV.
My Bengaluru man, Chanaida.
Namaste, Dr. Vishwa. I think it's such a great pleasure talking to you. You know, having read your books, the kind of light that it throws on Mahabharata, it gives us new equipment to look at it and write differently. My question to you is, what was your aha moment in Mahabharata? You know, what was that moment that gave you the where the integrity of Mahabharata became very evident, where you took a significant bend in the journey with respect to Mahabharata, and because knowledge always, it's not linear, it comes, you're progressing in a direction, but at one stage it explodes.
Yeah, I mean, there are, of course, deep answers I can give. For example, my karma, my vasanas, my purva janma sukriti, my gurus, and what they have blessed me, and Ishvaranugraha, so all those are there. But for now, I would like to tell a story myself. It's a story of what happened. So I was reading for me, my Hindu praxis was in its place. So from childhood, I would go to temples. My family was secular, but I was weird. So I would go to temples. I would talk to other people in temples. Finding a co-bhakta was a great thing. And I had that experiential fervor, but I never thought that would be a part of academics at all. So first I studied Homer, and I was dissatisfied with the historicizing interpretations of Homer that I found in my Western academic colleagues. So I decided to try a totally new approach, is to relate the ancients to ancients rather than ancients to modern Europeans. So I went there and I was reading the Mahabharata and stuff. It was very interesting. Snake sacrifice, Takshaka, and so on. But remember, in the second Parvan, Paushya Parvan, the second mini Parvan, Paushya Parvan, Upa Parvan, if you want to call it, Uttanka is bringing earrings that were stolen by Takshaka. And Uttanka is trying to get them back. And on this journey, he meets a big man on a big horse. And the man says, blow into this horse's ass. I could not believe I was reading this in a scripture. Blow into the horse's ass. So I was a mixed. First of all, I thought it was funny. Second, I thought it was too close to the sort of National Geographic primitive descriptions. And then I could not get that out of my head. I mean, come on, you read that somebody say, seriously, blow into this horse's ass, and it's an image that doesn't go out of your head. I'm sorry, I'm sensitive. And then I read some more, and Uttanka goes to his teacher and says, what was that? Explain it to me. And his teacher explains it. And he says the horse was the sacrificial fire to which you gave your pranas. I remember hair standing on its end. I was just amazed that behind that grotesque exterior, it was dazzling. I was hooked. I was hooked. So I wanted to read the epic according to this interpretive tool that you have to interpret the imagery and so on. And then I ran into, of course, the Western academics, because if it is only historical, there is no interpretation. It's a fact, it's a fact, it's a fact. So that began my journey with that image. I'm sorry, it's not very deep or anything, but that's how my journey started.
Very interesting.
Thank you. So you're in Bengaluru?
Yes.
Oh, that's very nice. Next time I come, I should.
Yeah, we must.
We must. Bengaluru is one of my favorite cities. So.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
Okay.
In fact, at least I think 5 of the writers belong to
Yeah,
Bengaluru.
I noticed 5 writers were from Bengaluru. Grandmothers and Bengaluru were well represented in this book.
So Vishwagaru, we also want to know about if you are planning to bring out layman's version of Science and Philology and Criticism, because the content is something which must reach the masses.
Okay, good. I will be happy to. I do not know about philology and criticism at this point, but for the science already we have, Professor Balaji and I have put together a smaller book, which is almost ready we are looking for a publisher so that if it can come out inexpensively, but with outstanding quality in terms of, like, it is edited, there are no typos, the font is excellent, the paper is good, those kinds of considerations, then yeah, sure. Sure. And I'm also not looking for a big academic publisher, because I already published with Oxford, Anthem, Routledge, Brill, De Gruyter. Every big publisher name is already there. So I don't have to play any game anymore. So academic game. So it's just a practical decision now.
Sure. All the best. And I think whoever is the publisher who bags it has to be privileged to publish you, Vishwagaru. And
I'm sure Hari will bag it, because Hari is very good at look at all the people he got here together.
Done.
Hari is like the Medicis of Florence that ushered in the Renaissance. So great. Does anyone else wish to speak to me?
You guys, this would be a great chance to not miss.
Actually, I take that, Saiji, take that back, because any one of you, please feel free to email me if you have any questions, or even if you don't have any questions and you want to talk to me for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can contact me. We can Zoom and talk privately, if you will.
So there's one question from the audience, Vishwagaru.
Yeah.
So Ram S says, can Professor Adluri suggest a reading list for people not very familiar with the Mahabharata? This would be very helpful list to share with friends and family.
Yeah, the first book is Suktankars on the meaning of the Mahabharata. If you read that, everything will click together.
Sure. And then proceed to the critical edition itself.
And proceed to the critical edition. The translations wise, the Chicago translation is pretty all right. I saw PDFs of it floating around, so maybe you can get it and read it. It is pretty good. I also like the translation by Bibek Debroy. Unfortunately, Bibek Debroy does not give numbers, verse numbers. So if you're looking up at the thing, there will be a problem. Also, I teach at Hindu University of America in the United States, and I'm trying to put together a certificate course on the Mahabharata. So there will be 6 or 8 quarter semester courses, which would take you a year and a half to finish. And I wanted to teach in the first class, it will be Adi Parvan, the first semester, and certain critical methods. And the next one will cover Sabha, Vana, and Virata, and in that way. And then I will also be doing one course on the philosophy in the Mahabharata, which would be Bhagavad Gita for sure, but also Narayaniya and Sanat Sujatiya and some teachings from Shanti Parvan, etc. So in this way, I want to create a kind of a certificate course that people can take and get certified. So if you're a teacher in a university, or you're a student who's wishes not to get into the whole Vedic Sanskrit grammar thing, and you're just interested in the Mahabharata, that course I'm creating. I don't know when that'll happen, but I'm struggling very hard to make it.
But that course is something which is the need of the hour, and we cannot think of a better person than you to.
No, it'll be Joydeep Bagchi and myself.
Okay, I request all of you to unmute yourself and switch on your video. We will take a group photograph. If you have the title of the book with you, please, if the book with you, please share it so that we can take a photograph, screenshot.
Yes.
Raksha, Abhinav, Abhyudaya, are you all there?
I'm still waiting, Saiji, for the book.
Oh, okay. But hey, you didn't send. I mean, we sent it. We don't know. We'll take that. Hey, wait, what's Raksha doing? And Pranshu ji, aapka pustak kahan hai?
It's in Noida.
Oh, okay. No problem. Okay, so, take a screenshot, please.
Okay, give me one second. I will take a screenshot.
Raksha?
Yeah, she's getting.
Let me know when you're all in a position with the book and all. And I think you are. So I'm going to count to 3 and then take a photo. So bring smiles, cheese, and
smile. Say Vyasa.
Vyasa.
Okay, done.
Good. All right.
So, Professor Adluri, there are a couple of questions that have come in through the chat that I don't think have been asked so far.
Sure.
So I'll read through a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them says...
Raksha is here. Shall we take another shot with her in it?
Sure.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, let's do that so that...
Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay, let's take one more. 1, 2, 3. And I think this is good. So I'll share all all screenshots so that people can select from those. So one question came from Ram Krishnan Sita Raman, who asks, is the critical Mahabharata being added to and modified with additional manuscript discoveries, or has it stopped at the stage Sukthankar left it?
There are, oh dear, no. There have no new manuscripts come up, number one. So Sukthankar did a pretty thorough job of getting all the manuscripts together. Number one. Number two, in fact, an opposite turn was taken when some people suggested that we do higher criticism, meaning try to remove certain contradictions in the text to make it more clean. But that would once again be subjective, and you are now adding and making additions to the book, which is not part of that traditional strict manuscript transmission. So that would be a higher criticism, as a form of vandalism. So unfortunately, that was the direction some people at Bhandarkar took this thing. And some people also meaninglessly talked about Draupadi's disrobing and redoing the critical edition, taking into account the Persian Mahabharata or whatever, Razannama. All these are, I would say, silly ideas. And so Suktankar's work cannot be superseded. His critical edition is the last word on the manuscript tradition of the Mahabharata. Sitaramji, namaste. Haven't seen you in a while. It's good.
There is one more question, and
Abhinav, can I ask one?
Yes. Go ahead, Yogini.
Okay. Thank you, Vishwaji, for a wonderful talk. It's always a learning experience. Every time I listen to you, there's something new that I learn. There is one question that is sort of, asked many a times by the youngsters, or even those who are a little hesitant about reading anything. Somehow Mahabharata gets related to religion, Hinduism, and nationalist and nature and things like that. It gets politicized. So in this technology era and materialistic era, how and why should we ask people to read Mahabharata? Why should we ask them? Why do you think that they should read? What is it that they would derive from it by reading it? If we have to explain this to a lay person, how can somebody like us explain it to them?
First of all, we are working with a group of very dangerous dichotomous categories, such as nationalism, right? Can we really have a nation, or can we really have a happy citizen, or a meaningful citizen without a little bit of patriotism? So the reduction of all patriotism, the reduction of all culture to nationalism serves very well the politicians and the academics who wish to polarize things for their profit. But for the majority of people, they need a little piety in their life, whatever form. Even if it is Islamic piety, I'm fine with it, as long as it's piety in the sense of nonviolence and love, and that there are deeper meanings to life and so on. The Mahabharata is a very inclusive text. It does not glorify either Brahmins or Kshatriyas or anything. And whatever form you worship God in, Krishna says, is you worship being. So the external form of the Mahabharata might appear to people to be Hindu or so, but Homer is Greek pagan, and Christians have been reading Homer. These are, again, ways in which what belongs to ordinary people, what belongs to grandmothers in the privacy of their homes, out of love for their grandchildren, toothless grandmothers telling the story of Ghatotkacha to their kids. Do you not see the violence academics and politicians are perpetrating when they politicize this Mahabharata and reduce it to a bitch fight among themselves, and nothing more? So again, returning to this venue, the Unsung Valor and the efforts of Harikiran and within Advaita Academy, Indic Academy, and so on, show that show that it is legitimate for all of us to be who we are. One does not have to make excuses for why one should read or should not read Mahabharata. If somebody prefers to read the Ramayana, let them read the Ramayana. So in my mind, maybe I'm a little naive, but in my mind, politics is politics, right? But people's lives are people's lives, and the Mahabharata is meant to enrich the lives of people. And I just hope that politicians on all sides of the spectrum, and I hope academics recognize that the Mahabharata is the patrimony, it is the inheritance, it is the right of every Indian, irrespective of their religion, caste, culture, job, whatever. And every Indian should step up to claim Vyasa's patrimony, I think.
Thank you.
Abhinavji, you said there was a question in the chat?
Correct. There are a couple of them that one is from Pingali-ji, and he asks, how does one differentiate between a good translation and a bad translation of our Itihasas? So people propagate their own interpretations, and these kinds of interpretations amount to violence.
Correct. And in the case of the Mahabharata, fortunately, Vyasa is so clever that even very programmatic interpretations do not violate the text. So as far as Mahabharata is concerned, any edition will do. If you're reading the critical edition, I myself use the Chicago edition, which as I said, is floating around on the web somewhere, the PDF, Mahabharata translate. And of course, there are many volumes to this, so there is that. There is M.N. Dutt translation from Parimal Publishers, which is this. Unfortunately, this is not the critical edition, but you can read this. It has the Sanskrit verses, and the entire Mahabharata critical edition, Mula Patha, is found on Smith website, which I will share with you now, so you will know how to look that up. So. So if you Google Smith Mahabharata, there is Mahabharata Indology. So you go to that website and you can access the electronic texts in this way. So you can go to the Adi Parvan and you can get it either in Devanagari, but you can also get the whole thing also in Roman, which would look like this. So here it begins. Adi Parvan 110 is the Mangala, which does not have a verse number. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam. And then so all these files are there. So if you're following the non-critical edition verse, you can always refer to this to see if it is there or not in that one. The other advantage is that if I want to do a word search, these are word searchable. So if I want to do a word search for Arjuna, so you see all the locations for that. So I recommend that as well for that reason. But the most beautiful and elegant translation is Ganguly's translation. It is also not the critical edition, but it reads beautifully. Could we hold on for 1 second?
Sure. The audience can start typing in questions they have for the writers as well. We'd be really happy to take them once we open up the floor for questions.
So I have some questions for the writers. Can you talk about approximately, how much time it took for you to write the story, and what were your, what led you to select that particular character on which you wanted to write a story? How did you, do your reading research, and what kind of approach did you take to each of the stories, right?
So I think once we let us all pass a round of introduction. Come, let each of the writers answer the question by Abhinav. It would be something very interesting to listen from each of the writers' perspective. So, what say, Abhinav?
Sure.
So, Bharati, if we can...
I think everybody can unmute and show the videos also, so that we can all see. It'll be faster.
Sure. Bharati, we can start with you.
Yeah. So let me start with a thank you to Sai. It's an honor to be here today and talk about Unsung Valor, of course. So this book gave me the perfect opportunity to combine two of my favorite pastimes, storytelling and talking about the Mahabharata, mainly the lesser-known stories. So my introduction to the epics happened earlier in life, thanks to my father. But when I started reading different versions, that was a different experience. One of my earliest projects, my line of work is writing. So one of my earliest projects was to rewrite the Ramayana in short chapter format for NRI kids. So when I was reading different later recountings of the Ramayana for that project, I found that each of them, be it Ramayana or Mahabharata, each of it came with its own skew. So with the Mahabharata, the fallout of this is that many new readers who are maybe unaware of KMG or Bori, they just reduce the epic to a mere war. They don't understand the gravity of the war. And most of the characters are reduced to Marvel movie type heroes and villains. So this is a real pity because the Mahabharata is a treatise on life itself. And every single character has a solid message to give, or many messages, in fact. And much of this is missed out. So for me, this book was this brilliant opportunity to look in depth into some lesser-known characters, what governed their actions and thoughts, why did they do what they did, and something like that. So for me, it was a chance to pay tribute to a very deserving hero, Iravan, Ulupi and Arjuna's son, and also the first of the Pandava sons to actually give up his life at Kurukshetra. So Iravan could have just waited until the war was done, after Hastinapur had been won, and then he could have pledged his allegiance to his father. But he chose not to be a spectator. He shouldered his responsibility towards Dharma. And he actually contributed significantly to the Pandava cause before giving up his life, battling quite enormous odds. So, and Iravan is just one of many heroes and heroines in the Mahabharata who helped knit the fabric of Dharma back together. So, through my stories or blog posts or my Twitter and Insta feed, my small attempt has always been and will be hopefully in the future to tell the stories of these heroes to the larger audience, to hopefully entice new readers of the Mahabharata into looking beyond the obvious, to not look at it superficially when they read the epic, and of course to learn more myself also with each and every attempt. That's it from my side.
have a comment to make, and I meant to show this to you all. So let me go. There is a technical term in classics, like Homer scholarship, called, and the word is aristeia. Aristeia means the shining moment, the best moment, the moment a warrior prepares his whole life for. Which you have all noticed, this moment when an unsung hero comes into the light, and that is his main moment. So stage one, God inspires a warrior, armor is mentioned, there's expression of enthusiasm, the hero advances, and then a killing streak begins. So here, 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 here. So this is not something that is just Vyasa is just making up. This is a kind of a storytelling tactic that is well grounded in epics. So finally, in stage 6, after winning many minor battles and facing many dangers, the hero himself is wounded. Then begins the hero's second round, where the hero kills even more people. And then there is an ultimate triumph, but that ultimate triumph need not be a victory which is optimistic. The hero may even die. But having the aristeia, he attains what Krishna calls kirti, or undying fame. And because that fame is undying, he gets Swarga Loka, or a kind of heaven. So I just wanted to share that because that seemed to me an important theme connecting all your stories. I was thinking about that aristeia motif, and all of you responded well to it and exploited it effectively to make your narrative move. But your narrative is moving because there is such a thing as the aristeia narratives, which is the common motif in the hero stories.
Thank you. That was a wonderful snippet. I think I'm going to, I've just taken the screenshot as you are explaining it, Vishwaji. So we will be putting that to a lot of use in our future writings.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we can move to Ranjit's introduction to his story. And
Namaste, everybody. The whole process of the story started with Sai Swarupaji, with her tweets on the Mahabharata battle statistics that she was doing. And this was going on over a period of time. And there were a couple of instances where she had stopped. And I remember pestering her to continue. I hope she forgives me for that. So when this was announced, I wasn't all that keen to, participate. I thought, okay, there would be better writers. I have always been told that I write pretty well, but one of my superpowers is being self-critical about my writing abilities. So that held me back. So I did what almost every other Indian man does when he's faced with a quandary like this. I wrote the story and showed it to my mother. So she was the one who told me, yes, that you have to mail it in, and then we'll see what happens. So I was very pleasantly surprised when she chose the story. And my first consideration for choosing a character was I wanted to choose somebody different, somebody who I thought nobody else would choose. And Shakuni looked like a good option. I didn't think too many people would want to write about a person who's perceived as very devious and one of the evil four in the Mahabharata, as Vyasa puts it. We were all given a brief that we were supposed to talk about what happened on a particular day in the battle, from dawn to dusk, and the warrior's mentality and his thoughts before it. So I was looking for a way to bring the entire character of Shakuni out during what happens on that one day. I wanted to posit Shakuni versus Krishna.
Yeah, that was amazing. The putting Krishna and Shakuni like that. It's very obvious, but I've never seen it done before. It's very obvious because Krishna is the counselor for the Pandavas and Shakuni is the counselor for the Kauravas. But you brought them together, and when I was reading it, I felt, oh, this is very interesting. I can't believe I missed it. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you.
I couldn't contain my praise. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a surprise to me that Shakuni did survive up to the 18th day. You find mentions of him. You don't find a battle scene constructed around him, but you always find him in the periphery. He's always there supporting some other warrior, or he's there being beaten and retreating and coming back. Shakuni died on the 18th day. So he was not one of those guys who were a backroom manipulator who preferred to be behind the action, the power behind the throne, but didn't really have the guts when it comes to facing his enemies. I needed to bring this facet out of Shakuni. I needed to present to the world that not only was this man a very brilliant manipulator or a very good reader of people's minds, and he could also, get into the van of the battle when it was required. He could do what was asked of him, that he was a warrior of no ill repute. I also wanted to bring in his thoughts on the rest of the characters in the Mahabharata, and also somehow bring to life the guilt that he would have. And I tried to personify Draupadi as his guilt. Which is why I made her a phantom that appears only to his eyes and nobody else's. So his two main rivals in my story are Sri Krishna, for one, and the other Krishna, that is Draupadi, and how the two of them work their magic around Shakuni on that one particular day to save Sahadeva and to remind him of what his end is going to be. So this was my interpretation of Shakuni for that one day of battle. Thank you to Sai Surapaji and Indic Academy for accepting it. Very, very happy to be here, and it was mesmerizing listening to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Rupal?
Yeah. So, namaste, everyone. I'm Rupal, and I wrote a story, The Invincible. That's the third story of the anthology. And I began writing, I don't know. I mean, I don't remember a time when I did not write. It was mainly for myself, pleasing myself. I've been writing since I was a kid. Everything was ridiculous, of course. But more than that, I was a reader, because I feel that, if you do not read, you will probably not be able to write also. And I could read just about anything, like anything under the sun. It just had to be a book and I could read it. And my introduction to Mahabharata comparatively came very late. I mean, I was always aware of it. I don't think there is any Indian who does not know about Mahabharata, thanks to popular culture. But then my knowledge of Mahabharata was also pretty limited to that. It was just by chance, because I was so confused looking at so many versions of it. And I was like, not everything can be Mahabharata. You cannot take 5 totally disparate versions of the same story and label everything as Mahabharata. So I came across the Kishori Mohan Ganguly's translation of the unabridged Mahabharata, the link to it, and it was fascinating. It was an eye-opening experience, and the wonder of it, that you're reading the epic which was composed centuries ago by Vyas, and I cannot describe the feeling. I just went through it. It took a while, but it was amazing. It was a journey, and it ultimately became a journey of self-discovery. As I was discovering the Mahabharata, I was also discovering myself, so many things. It was an amazing journey. And as for my story in the anthology on Jayadratha, when I was going through the challenge, the Indic challenge based on Swai Sarupaji's analysis of the war, so there was this one line on Jayadratha, the 13th day war, the day Abhimanyu was killed in the Chakravyuh devised by Dronacharya. And it occurred to me that, I have never really thought about it. And everyone describes this one day, which actually changed the tone of the war, which became the most decisive point of the war. And the only thing that we talk about is either the death of Abhimanyu or how Abhimanyu died. And then we just say that, Arjun was taken far away with a ruse and Jayadratha stopped everyone from following Abhimanyu inside. And I was like, that cannot be it. It has to be more than that. It has to be something. How can just one warrior stop everyone from entering Chakravyuh after Abhimanyu? And it's just reduced to one line. And I went back to Mahabharata. I read about that entire war again. And I was like, wow, this is something that I should be writing about. And that's why I picked Jayadratha. But then one of the challenges of writing from the point of view of an antagonist is that you cannot simply whitewash his character to, make him more sympathetic to the reader and kind of just brush away all his sins and whatever he did, because that would be like going against the flow of the story itself, going against the flow of dharma. And I did not want to do that. So that was one challenge. I did not want to take away from the fact that he was a scoundrel, a very brave scoundrel, but still a scoundrel. And I did not want to take away from the grayness of the character. And so that's how I wrote the story on Jayadratha. And I had fun writing it, basically. I enjoyed writing the story. And I wish the readers also have fun reading it. And that's it from my side. Thank you so much, Sai Swarupa, Indic Academy, for giving this opportunity of connecting with Mahabharata in a meaningful way, something that I'd always wanted to do. Thank you so much.
So glad, Drupal. Next, can we have Siddharth?
Namaste. I wrote the story Indra Among Rakshasas. It's a story on Ghatotkacha. So funnily enough, my introduction to the Mahabharata was not through reading, actually. There's a saying that elders use in my family that if you keep the Mahabharata at home, family fights would occur. So it was mostly Ramayana, which I grew up with. There was this animated film on the Ramayana, which I used to watch and rewatch multiple times. It was only during a trip to Bali with my parents when I was very young, around 8 or 9 years old. Right when you leave the Bali airport, there is this huge statue of Ghatotkacha fighting Karna. It is, and I didn't know who that was back then. So my initial exposure, that as a young boy, that was the coolest thing to me at 8 years old, seeing Ghatotkacha fighting Karna like that. So the first few, like immediately after that, it was reading the abridged versions. Like first it was Rajaji's version, then I got into the Amar Chitra Kathas. But when this competition was announced, I felt it would be a great opportunity to dive into the critical edition and into Bibek Devroy's version of the Mahabharata, his translation. So, and one of the characters that I could write upon was Ghatotkacha. So I didn't miss that opportunity at all. I knew who I wanted to write on from the beginning. To me, when someone mentions Mahabharata, it's usually the first images that come up in their mind are probably Abhimanyu in the Chakravyuha or Krishna charging towards Bhishma with a chariot wheel. To me, it was always Ghatotkacha fighting Karna. So I knew that if I had to write any story, it would always contain that scene in it. But what I didn't know was Ghatotkacha himself had children who fought in the war along with him, and that one of his sons died on the exact same night that he died. That's Anjana Parvan. So I thought it would be a very interesting way for me. The focus is always on Bhima Ghatotkacha, that duo, because of the values that Ghatotkacha shows in the epic. he famously tells Bhima that whenever you think of me, I will always be there. I will always come to you. And that loyalty, that devotion to his father, I thought, why not juxtapose it? Why not show it in a way where he's the father now and his son is with him in the battlefield? And the descriptions of Anjana Parvan, apart from a physical description, not much is said about his personality. So I thought that could be a good window for me, a good place for me to sink in and probably write. That was my take on this story and on Ghatotkacha as a character. And I would deeply like to thank Indic Academy. I would like to thank Sai Swarupa ji for selecting my story, for finding some substance in it so that I've reached this stage here to share the screen with Dr. Vishwa Adluri. So I'm extremely humbled, and thank you so much to Indic Academy and to everyone who's made this journey possible.
Amrita.
Namaste, everyone. I'm Amrita, and I wrote The Mediocre Son, which is on Prativind. So my first introduction to Mahabharata was at the age of 11 when I was in school, and it was via a children's version, Bengali version, abridged by Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhary, who is the grandfather of legendary filmmaker Satyajit Ray. And at that very young age, it was the character of Draupadi and her polyandry and her polyandrous marriage, the whole setup, and her love story, her affection for Arjun that really attracted me. But maybe because I was very young at the time, my love for Mahabharata it remained dormant after that for a long time. And it was truly rekindled in 2013 when it was when the epic was made. Adapted in a very famous Hindi serial on a very famous Hindi channel. And I was in college then, and the show immediately sparked my interest in the epic. And I became very actively involved on social media discussions and debates on the various characters. And interestingly, at that time, I came to know that there is something called unabridged Mahabharata, something which I was not aware of. I came to know about Kishori Mohan Ganguly's translation and the critical edition. And it was at that time that I started reading them out. And I realized that there is so much that we don't know about the text of Mahabharata through these televised versions or popular adaptations, because in general, what happens is the story is so big, it is always condensed in a very typical good versus bad, in a very shortened way. Because of which a lot of nuances are missed out, which we can find only in the unabridged version. So through these social media debates and everything, it was here only that I came to know about Sai Swarupa ji and her book on Draupadi. And I literally stalked her on Facebook after that. And I found out what all other books she's written, Abhaya. And then I read them up, and it was on her timeline that I came to know about the initiative by Indic Academy about the lesser known warriors on Mahabharata, on Kurukshetra. So coming to my story, my obvious choice of character was Prativind, as he is the son of Draupadi and Yudhisthira. Now, the text itself states very little about the 5 sons of Draupadi, except that they are mentioned collectively every now and then, and they have some mention in the battle scenes. So, because some other sons of the Pandavas, which are like Abhimanyu, Ghatotkacha, and Iravan, because they are such fantastic warriors that somewhere the sons of Draupadi, they get eclipsed and overshadowed. So that is why I picked up this character. And there were a few things I wanted to explore, basically, through my story. First is how it must have been for a young warrior like Prativind to be amidst people like Arjun, Bhima, Abhimanyu, Ghatotkacha, who were such marvelous warriors, and be relatively mediocre in their presence, And yet, despite that, he doesn't dwell on his shortcomings, and he strives to succeed with whatever he has. This is what really fascinated me, and this is what I wanted to explore, because one thing that really intrigued me was that even though he was not perhaps as great as his brothers, the famous brothers like Abhimanyu and Ghatotkacha, But he did manage to survive the 18-day war and was killed in the end by Ashwathama. So he must have had something in him to be able to survive such terrible war for all these days. That was one. And another thing was that he must have had a chip on his shoulder regarding his mother's humiliation. And he must have been at some point, at some level, driven by justice for her sake as well. So my story has honestly very less, compared to other stories, it has less content about war. It focuses on duel between Prativind and Chitra, or King Chitra or Abhichara on the 16th day. And there's a brief mention of a battle between Prativind and Ashwathama on the 12th day. But most of the story, it focuses on Prativind's psyche, his thoughts about his mother, and the brotherhood he shared with Shuddhakarman, who was a son of Draupadi and Arjun, and even some memories about his cousin Abhimanyu. So that's it from my side. I thank Indic Academy and Sai Swarupaji, Hariji for this entire initiative, for getting us published. And I thank Vishwaji for his marvelous answers that he gave. I mean, it was really insightful.
No, I mean, the Prativindya story was the first time I got a look at Prativindya. I was so humbled. I was like, where is she bringing this stuff from? It was just humbling, really. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, Amrita. Deepak.
Namaste, everyone. Wish you a very good evening and good morning to friends in the US. So my story is about Bhagadata. So this was actually my first attempt at writing a story. So prior to that, in my career, I had written a lot of technical related stuff like books for students and journal articles. So my knowledge of the Mahabharata was not from the unabridged version. I never read it. So my interest came about thanks to Saiji's tweets on the Kurukshetra war. So that really gave me an idea of what happened in the Kurukshetra war. Because our knowledge of the war is based on what we have seen in the TV shows. So there's only this welding, different color of welding, slow motion scenes. So we had only got that kind of a perception of the war. So in reality, it was something different. I mean, it was really phenomenal the way the war actually took place. So that inspired me to start writing about the war. And actually what happened was I started writing a book on Abhimanyu. So while writing that, while studying about day 12 of the war, so I came across the account of Bhagadata. So as a coincidence, at the same time, Saiji had come out with this anthology idea. So I immediately decided that I'm going ahead with Bhagadata. So the reason for that was, I was really impressed by the fact that Bhagadata was a war machine. So he was actually a 2-in-1 package. So one was, he himself was a veteran warrior. And second, he had that powerful war elephant, Supratika. So unlike other elephants, it was not just satisfied in taking its master to the battlefield, but it would actively participate and in fact terrorize the opponents. So on day 12, he unleashed mayhem on the Pandava army. And it was such a fearsome assault of both the king and his elephant that even Bhima had to flee. He could not handle the attack. So Yudhisthira, Satyaki, everyone had to flee. So only one who could handle him at that time was Arjuna. So there's another interesting thing which I came across when I started researching for this story was the fight between Arjuna and Bhagadata during the Rajasuya Yajna. So at that time, it took 8 days for Arjuna to finally get Bhagadata to surrender. So Bhagadata tries everything for 8 days. So finally, he runs out of options. So he says, I can't fight anymore. So tell me what you want. And Arjuna says that you please give tribute to Yudhisthira and come and be a part of the Rajasuya Yajna. So there is a background to Arjuna and Bhagadata prior to that. And on day 12, so there is this fierce fight between Arjuna and Bhagadata, which I focused on in my story. And one more thing, what impressed me about Bhagadata was that the Mahabharata text, the translation by K.M. Ganguly, so it talks about how he was the king of the Kinnaras, Yavanas, and Mlechas. So it talks about he was heading an empire which ranged from the hills to the seashore. So my analysis was that probably the entire eastern region was ruled by him. So he was truly a great warrior, and for him, war was dharma. So he had no stakes in this particular war. He would not gain anything whether Duryodhana won or Yudhisthira won. So maybe it is because his father Naraka was killed by Krishna. So maybe he had a personal stake. Maybe he felt humiliated that he had to surrender to Arjuna. So he chose the Kaurava side. And day 12 was his day when he had to finally unleash himself on the Pandavas. And Arjuna was the only one who could tackle him. So the main reason for Bhagadatta's power was that he had the Vaishnavastra, which Narakasura had given to him. So as a last resort, when nothing worked, he decided to unleash it on Arjuna. So, and as Professor Adluri has so nicely pointed out, it impaled Krishna, but then it becomes into a Vaijayantimala and its energy goes into the Lord. So that's when finally Arjuna is able to kill Bhagadatta. So I found this part of the story fascinating. And the main thing what I found was that unlike Narakasura, who had perception of being an evil king, there was nothing to suggest that Bhagadatta was a tyrant or an evil king. He was a warrior. He spent a lot of his life fighting on the battlefield. So he had defeated Indra previously, and Indra was his friend. So he also says that Pandu is his friend. So he was a warrior, and ultimately he succumbed on the battlefield, which is the greatest thing which can happen to a veteran warrior. So this is about my story. And as a debutant author, it was really great that I got a chance to get published. So thanks to Saiji, thanks Hariji and the entire Indic team. And we have been getting amazing feedback from readers. So really sincerely thankful to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Deepak. Vishwagaru, it was an honor, privilege, and a pleasure to interact with you over the session. We don't know how the 2 hours passed, and
thank you.
We are waiting for your next book. Indic Academy would be so happy to publish it, and we at Indic Book Club will put our best foot forward in promoting it to the masses.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, each one of you. Thank you for bringing the light of the Mahabharata into my life in this new way. I really, really appreciate it. Om Namo Narayanaya, Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vishwa.
Oh, no problem, Hariji. Namaste.
Yeah. So next would be Pranshu.
Hi. So, yeah, according on the same lines, right? I was aware of Mahabharata as such, from the childhood again, growing up in India. Like I would actually always tell a joke like this, that my daughter is an American, my mother is British, and my grandmother was Canadian who told me the stories, but fir bhi dil hai Hind. So, but the idea of like detailed Mahabharata actually came from my grandfather, maternal grandfather. He used to keep a Shanti Parv and Yog Vashisht, a couple of books, among other books, by his bedside. And as a 6-year-old, he gave them to me. And so for the next 6-7 years, I read Shanti Parv, which you could see was like a little damaging experience for a child. Till I was about 12, when I found my the full complete set, which my grandmother had inherited from my great grandfather, and that's how I basically, and because of Shanti Parv, the details in that, the real, it's basically the whole philosophy lies in that section, which everybody ignores because it is after the war. So that is where I basically got interested in the detailed aspects of the war. And Shanti and Anushasan Parv also basically deal with a little bit on the human scale of these things. And so from the beginning, when I was reading Mahabharata, I always liked these extra characters, like, they don't have to be the heroes or the main characters of it, but the story is a little bit story on the others. Like my mother was in 80s she was doing a research on a story for Eklavya. He's a character who comes in Adi Parv for a few segments. He's a little popular character. because of his background. He was actually a cousin of Krishna. And during that research, which my mom was doing, she brought a lot of books. And in Kamala Subramaniam's relatively less abridged edition, I came across Yudhamanyu and Utmoja. And these were these two warriors who were basically, chosen to be the wheel protectors for Arjun. And they fought throughout the 18 days of war. Again, as Amrita was talking about Prativindya. These were not ordinary warriors. They had something extra about them. They were the survivors, and that's one of the things I actually tried to bring in this, in my story. Is I put in the quote from Patton, actually, General Patton, that no one won a war by dying gloriously for his countries. The wars are won by making sure someone else dies gloriously for their country. It's only the survivors who basically can enjoy the fruits of victory if they are looking for fighting for dharma and other stuff. So that's why these characters were interesting to me, and that's why I discovered a bunch of others like Kanan and Dhatnaika, Indrasen, Vishok, Dhaume, et al. Vyas Mahabharata is full of these gems of characters littered right through the epic. And they are generally ignored but essential to the story. They stick with the heroes through literally sickness and health, through prosperity and exile. They were closer than the family itself. Like their cousins are the ones who were trying to kill them. So I delved into a little bit on the motivations of these people. And as Dr. Adluri just talked about, that it's the shining light of the Mahabharata has this inner shining light. And I remember a phrase from one of my grandmother's poetry books: "Chalte rahe jalus ke aage wo tamam raat, wo to mashalchi hain haath mein ujala liye hue." They kept walking all night, leading the troops. They are the torchbearers, carrying the illuminations in their hands. And these characters basically are the sort of the meat and the sinews of this epic. And that's where I wanted to write about Yudhamanyu. The second aspect, obviously, was the day 14. This is another very important day of the war. It was the anvil on which the victory of Dharma was forged, literally. This was the turn of the tide, literally. This was a day when they chose an attacking mode for the first time in the war. They were active and not reactive for the first time. And even Vyas also spends a lot of day on this war. On this battle, on this 14th day of the battle. It's bigger than the total description of the war in the Bhisham Parv. It's bigger than the whole of Shalya Parv. So this small description, this 14th-day battle, is a huge segment of the war itself. I think it's about 17% of the war is basically on this day only, day 14. And it basically shows that there's going to be victory. When you go back later and when you go into Stri Parv, Gandhari finds the dead bodies from this day on the battlefield, that the Kaurav army lost so many soldiers that day that they could not police their battlefield. Their infrastructure, their war machine broke down that day. That is the day which the victory is assured. Another tertiary point I wanted to bring out in this story, which actually was that there's all this stories about the eclipse and all that. So I wanted to literally bring out that, yes, Narayan was the guide, but it was the the human effort, superhuman effort even, of Arjun, which actually did that deed. And this is something basically, we sort of try to eclipse the effort, the hard work. And that's where, again, I talked about this, that, it is not only the hard work is to live and build on that victory, to use its fruit and build a legacy about it. And that's where these characters are very important. These 14 odd characters, which are like the servants of Pandavas, or the people associated around the support staff. And they are there in beginning of, they are from there when they went into exile to when they actually won the war, and they were the ones who went to Hastinapur to set up the coronation. So this idea that what is the battle, what is this war to them? They are not worried about this Bhumi Bharan project of Vyas. They are not worried about or they may be worried, but they are do not concerned. They are concerned about how the dharma affects them. And that's fair, as I said, they actually stuck with the Pandavas because they just loved them. And this is what I wanted to bring out, and that's what, that nobody won, that basically you do not win the war by fighting who you hate. You win the war by protecting who you love. And then on Valentine's Day, we are presenting this book. So I wanted to put that point out there. Thank you. And I really, I appreciate Sai and all the work she did with me in editing this, and India Academy for giving this idea, this opportunity, and the platform for sharing my story.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Pranchu. It was a pleasure reading your story as well. So we'll move to Shiv Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you, Sai Swarupa. So the way it began was I had just then started writing on Mahabharata, a couple of articles on Indic Today. And of course, Indic Today and Indic Academy is one platform where all the civilizational thought is flowering. And I was looking for where all I can engage myself with, and then suddenly this opportunity to write a story on one of the Mahabharata warriors came. The inspiration for Mahabharata, everybody else has said that, and like Dr. Vishwa himself said, starting from the grandmother ecosystem. We breathed Ramayana and Mahabharata at home. Mother had told Ramayana a million times, but Mahabharata too. But then, at least in Karnataka, the discourse culture is so deep that one kept listening to different stories of Mahabharata at different points in time, in different places, by different acharyas. And, it was all the time in the air, and you read a book and there is some reference to some story in Mahabharata. And so I began collecting that, and I realized that the story of Mahabharata is just not the Kuru Pandava, Kaurava Pandava conflict, but it is much more than that. And by then Amar Chitra Katha was there, and one had read all the Amar Chitra Katha stories, and I obviously, in the Kurukshetra war, three moments are very touching. One is when Bhishmacharya falls. So it's like it's a moment, in Mahabharata. And then it is Abhimanyu and Ghatotkacha. In particular, why Ghatotkacha was very, I was very attracted, was that fabulous character, very interesting person, huge, and makes for a great imagination. Cameo, not a very big role, but extremely impactful. And in the folk culture, there is a significant reimagination of Ghatotkacha. His entire Abhimanyu's marriage and Ghatotkacha going and helping it. It's not there in the Vyasa Bharata, but it is so prevalent in the entire Mayabazar movie. And there is so much imagination around Ghatotkacha. At the same time, the 14th day is phenomenally important, and Ghatotkacha, his death makes the fundamental difference, most critical difference, and that Karna wanting to hold the Shaktiyayudha and Ghatotkacha, forcing it for Karna to hit on him. I could never forget that. At the same time, our lives are not our lives. Our lives is a function of how we live with everybody else and how we see others and how others see us. So I wanted to view Ghatotkacha from the eyes of all others who interacted with him, and what was the impact of that interaction on Ghatotkacha in turn. He went and helped Draupadi in Vanaparva. It's a small moment, but what would have happened? How would have Hidimba felt, when she was sending Ghatotkacha up and down, and post Bhimasena going, what would have happened on the ground for Hidimba? And there are indications of that when Alambusha and Alayudha, they come and in their proclamations of war, they refer to Bhima killing their parents, and Bhima and Hidimba marrying a man was a matter of insult to the Rakshasas. So it is in this background I connected all the dots and wrote the story. At the same time, Bhima's marriage to Hidimba and eventual birth of Ghatotkacha is part of larger metaphor crafted into Mahabharata, where Bhima is the Pandava who kills maximum number of Rakshasas. But Bhima marries Hidimba and there is an offspring. So there is an inclusivity as well. So in Mahabharata, always the engagement is multidimensional. So the same Bhimasena who kills Rakshasas, it is through them that a connection for the Kuru Pandava, Kuru kingdom with Rakshasas happen. So in this light, I wanted to reimagine all of that. And these reimaginations are really the instruments and processes for our rediscovery. So we bring the tradition into our own times through these reimaginations. And my own fascination with Ghatotkacha made me choose Ghatotkacha for this reimagination. And of course, all this is happening because of the platform that we have from Indic Academy. I think, it's a great civilizational journey that's happening through that. And thanks to Harigaru and thanks to Sai Swarupa for inspiring all of us, for going through this journey and coming up with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiva. It was a pleasure reading through your story as well, and I'm so glad we all teamed up on it. So we'll move to Raksha.
Namaste, everyone. I'm Raksha Rajesh, the author of the story, The Righteous Traitor. I am 19 years old and I am a law student. I mean, am I really a law student if I don't brag about it or try to add the fact that I am one in every sentence that I say? But jokes aside, writing has always been a passion of mine since I was little. And still, if it weren't for my father, I wouldn't be here today because he asked me to be fearless and not worry about what other people would think of my writing. The best part about all of this is that I have been able to meet all of these wonderful people present here and the lovely readers who took out their time to appreciate our stories. And listening to Dr. Luri today has been mesmerizing. It's been a privilege, honestly. Now, coming to my story, my main character is Yuyutsu. And Yuyutsu is the stepbrother of the Kauravas and the son of Dhritarashtra and Gandhari's maid Sugada. So what drew me to choose Yuyutsu is the fact that he is a graceful man who strongly believes in Dharma, even though he's had many reasons not to because of his rough childhood. And the people surrounding him were filled with greed and a lot of other bad qualities. He's a person who's been devoid of love from his father. But on the other hand, he was brought up with a lot of devotion from his mother and took a lot of her qualities. So he is the younger brother of Duryodhana and the other 99 Kauravas' older brother, which makes him the second oldest. So his character is an inspiration for all those who choose to do or want to do the right thing despite trying circumstances. So I grew up listening and reading the rich history of India, and to me, Mahabharata is the fountain of knowledge and the reservoir of wisdom. Despite being a 5,000-year-old epic, Mahabharata has many things to learn from, especially in the qualities of being dharmic and doing one's duty correctly. It's a melting pot of numerous connected stories, and one can always relate to it themselves or other characters depicted in the epic. All in all, I am very excited and grateful to be here. My selected story has actually given me a lot of confidence, and I have continued writing short stories for different blogs and platforms, and I'd like to thank Ms. Sai Swarupa for her constant guidance and Indic Academy support for budding authors like me, and I hope to make it big someday. Thank you.
Thank you, Raksha. We wish you all the best. It was a pleasure reading your story as well as the story of Abhyuday. You guys are our hope. I'm so happy I found you guys through this book. So we move to Abhyuday. Before Abhyuday starts about his book, let me say that once when I read his story and then I came to know that he's a 14-year-old, I couldn't believe myself, because at 14, I was just beginning to read. I had just discovered the unabridged version of Mahabharata. I had not even begun to read it. And at this age, he got to write a whole short story. And though he wrote on an antagonist like Jayadratha, at such a young age, he did not lose the sight of Dharma. And that's what gives me hope about the whole generation, Abhyuday. So please go on.
Namaste, everyone. My name is Abhyuday Kiran Hadal, and I'm in class 8, and I'm the author of Killing of Jayadratha. So I wrote about Jayadratha. So one of the main things I had to keep in mind while writing about Jayadratha was not be overly sympathetic towards him and not to invoke a lot of sympathy from the readers. So I discovered the Mahabharata from my grandparents, as Adluri ji said that grandmothers are professors of the Mahabharata. My grandmother introduced me to the Mahabharata and told me short stories from there, and that made me very passionate about it. And I started reading more about it on internet, and then I read the unabridged version by Bibek de Broy. And then I'm really thankful for Sai Swarupa ji for giving me this opportunity to this is my debut work, and I hope I write a book someday. That's about it.
Thank you, Abhyuday. Thank you, all writers. It was amazing to rewind the whole journey as each of you went through your stories and experiences. And thanks a lot, Indika and Hari Kiran Anaya, for encouraging us all through the journey. Both the ideas, the idea behind my quantitative study, as well as the idea to make a part of that study get into popular imaginations and invite stories from people who really, really value Mahabharata. It has been his idea, and I am so happy I found these 10 writers. It's a kind of transformational point in my life. It gives me a lot of hope that the Mahabharata is here to stay, and the Hindu heart pumps for Mahabharata, as Vishwaji rightly said. So thanks a lot. Viewers, sorry, we cannot take any more questions, but please join Indic Book Club Facebook group. All the authors here are members there, and we would be happy to interact with all of you. Thank you for joining. It was, I know it was a 2.5-hour session, but I did not notice how time flew. Thank you for being a part of this program. Thank you, writers. Thank you, Hari Kiran ji and Indika. Thank you, Yogini, Abhinav, and thank you, Vishwaji. Thank you.
Thank you, Saiji.
Thank you, Sai.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Namaste. Dhanyavad.
Namaste.